Do you remember when spring arrived last year? Not the calendar date, but kind of the moment where you first smelled the first green thing that felt alive, the first crocus, the first robin singing in your backyard, the first evening where you were left the back door open. Most of us have sort of a fuzzy general sense of when things happen. Somewhere in March or April, things start to change. Don't write it down. We didn't track it, and it's gone by the time next year rolls around, and we have nothing really to compare it to. And there is this science, it's a bit of an art, but built entirely around this idea called phenology. And people have been practicing it for centuries without knowing what it's called, probably before it was called anything. Today, we're going to explore what it is and what you can do to start doing it on your own. It's one of those really fun kind of backyard sciences that you can do right now. So the idea is that phenology is the study of a cyclic and seasonal natural phenomenon. That's as nerdy as we get in this whole thing. It means tracking the time of nature's events. When did that first flower bloom? If you have snowdrops in your yard, like I do, I have also purple crocuses. When did they first come? When did you hear the first frog call? You know when I heard it? Last night. When was the first migrating bird that arrived? When does it leave? When was the first insect or first bumblebee you saw? And this word comes from the Greek word meaning to show or appear. Phenology is literally the study of appearances, the moment when nature shows up. It's one of the oldest, like I said, sciences in the world. And one of the earlier practitioners of it would never have called it a science because they would have thought it's a farmer tracking because they have to know when to plant plants, or hunters needing to know when migrations come or breeding cycles happen so that they can start hunting. Communities across North America had sophisticated calendars tied to food, medicine, ceremony, not based on sort of abstract dates, but observational events. Plant corn when the oak leaf is the same size as the squirrel's ear. That idea, the walleye spawn when the lilacs bloom. In the sense of formal science, it begins to take shape sort of in the 17 to 1800s, where there was a naturalist named Robert Marsham in England, and he started to record the first dates of 27 natural events on his estate in 1736, continued it for 62 years, and his family carried those records on after he passed. The single family's observation across generations became one of the most valuable long-term ecological data sets in history. And Henry Davis Thoreau kept meticulous notes in Concord, Massachusetts throughout his 1850s. His journals recorded the dates of flowers, when ice was out of Walden's pond, the dates that certain birds would arrive, and that kind of precision satisfies basically any scientist. These records are still being studied today. We think of it, in terms of, like last night, we saw bugs last night, or we heard a certain bird. It's 3 weeks earlier than it was the previous year. We're having a very early spring right now. So when phenology moves from kind of a hobby to sort of illuminating is when you start to track the same thing year after year. You start to see patterns that emerge that you couldn't see in any other way. If you look at it, spring never arrives all at once. It kind of arrives in layers. That spring maples bloom often in early March in my neck of the woods. Snowdrops, witch hazel, then pussy willows. They arrive kind of in order. The robins kind of arrive in force. Some of our robins migrate and some of them don't. The wood frogs start calling. The trout lilies and trilliums start to emerge on the forest floor. The first bumblebee queens appear. You start seeing lilacs and then eventually warblers. And each one of them are sort of a rung on a ladder that you can see if you're paying attention to it rung by rung. The same sequences happen every year. And what changes is that if you have a warm February, it can push the whole ladder forward about 2-3 weeks. If you get a cold snap in April, it can pause it. But the order stays the same. The maple tree is before the trillium and before the warblers. So the order always kind of remains somewhat the same. And you can use these events to predict the next event so you know exactly what it means. Again, it's something that traditional farmers and naturalists have used for a long, long time. The lilac blooms used to mean it was time to plant a certain crop. The hummingbird's arrival meant that the trumpet vine would soon be opening. And so this is something that you can do in your own backyard. One of the most satisfying things about this as a personal practice is over the years, with your observation, you can learn your yard very specifically, your neighborhood very specifically, your county or your state, how it runs on its own timing. A south-facing slope warms faster than on the north side. A yard near the creek stays cooler longer. And so your observations are going to tell the story of this location, not just a general field guide of a particular area. If you're looking in your backyard and as you walk, maybe you go for a walk in the evening and you start to realize what spring looks like in your neck of the woods. And you can start learning, like I said, that observational order for your area. And then you start to write down the dates. You can actually start recording these in notebooks. I'm a digital gal. I do everything on like Notion and online digital notebooks. My friend M is an amazing person at this. She writes down, I forgot how many different traits, but there are over 30 of them. The first time she sees a bumblebee, the first time the chipmunks, go on into a hibernation. When do those chipmunks come out of hibernation? Those kinds of things. Now, I only have very few on those things, but I have wood ducks. Every year, this pair of wood ducks appear on my one tree in my backyard, and I take note of it every year. But you can start to, on your own, see, when do the silver maples start to flower? I have a silver maple. That's the tree they land on. They get these tiny, reddish little buds on these bare branches. Chickadees begin to change their call slightly. Instead of a 2-note whistle, they start replacing it with their full spring songs. Squirrels become much more active and start chasing each other. That is happening now. Start taking note on it. In mid-March, like I said, you're going to see the snowdrops, the crocuses emerge in the garden. You'll see red-winged blackbirds have returned to the marsh. Mine are back now. First comes the males. They stake out a territory before the females come. The males are here, and they are staking out their territory. Skunk cabbages kind of pushes through the wet, muddy areas in the woods. They generate a little bit their own heat. You start hearing wood frogs and spring peepers. Heard spring peepers last night. And you will start recognizing those patterns. Like I said, you'll start seeing other types of blooms on southern-facing slopes and on southern backyards. You'll start to see the robins shift from individual scavenging to widespread singing. The turkey vultures start to return. I have a tree that's right over there, and probably about 30 turkey vultures like to roost in that tree before they start nesting and having their own babies. They are back. Trout lilies will start to emerge on the forest floor. And like I said, the bumblebee queens will start looking for food and looking for a new hole. Somewhere in mid to late April, you'll start seeing trilliums. They're called Dutchman breeches, and they have little white flowers on them. It kind of looks like someone basically took underwear and hung it on a line, essentially, Dutchman breeches. And then you'll start seeing the spring ephemeral wildflowers. The tree swallows start returning to the nest. I saw my first tree swallow yesterday. Hummingbirds will arrive late April, early May. The warblers don't come back until probably mid-May. And you'll start seeing it all. The lilacs will bloom. The mushrooms will start to grow. The dawn chorus will be louder than ever. And so this is the idea, is that each of these data points will show you where you are in the year. It will be great, for you if you wanted to sit down and start keeping your own journal. All you need is a notebook and a pen, or, sometimes people write them in calendars. Like I said, I'm a digital gal. I write them all online, so I have my notes nicely written and readable. But whatever it is that you like to keep notes, this is something that you could do. And the important thing is to do it year to year to year. So you can figure out, is this year early? Is this year late? Now, you would have asked me, this was a particularly cold and brutal winter. But suddenly we are now going towards El Nino, which means that my neck of the woods gets warmer and drier. And now we are starting to see early spring because it's a little bit warmer than was expected. particularly considering how brutal our winter was. So start to track it. First robin, first bumblebee, first dandelion to open in your yard, the first hummingbird you saw flying at your feeder, maybe the first date if you're near a pond or a lake. When was the first day that there was no more ice on the lake? Keep track of those types of things. Pick, maybe 5 things that you are genuinely interested in, that you genuinely notice every year, and then start journaling about it. Track it faithfully. And like I said, my friend Em, she probably tracks, 30 to 50 things. It's really quite amazing. She's a very good journaler. But, whatever works for you, this is a fun type of task and something that makes you a neighborhood naturalist, a little citizen scientist right outside your front door. Like I said, once you start to do this, then you'll start to know relationships. You'll start to understand when things come back. You'll start to be able to see patterns in the year to know whether or not this is going to be an early spring year or a late spring year. I'm always trying to camp in the next month or so. Should I go early or am I going to get cold? Like one year I went camping with my poor friend from down south. And we went camping. We got 28-degree low temperatures. It was a very brutal spring. Maybe if I did a better job with keeping a journal, I would be able to tell what kind of spring this is turning out and whether or not we should camp early or camp a little bit later in this particular year. Just grab a notebook and start on your first page and just go write down 5 of your favorite things that you noticed. And like I said, then next year, start noticing how it changed that next year. Start looking for differences year to year. And then you can tell someone else. My friend Em, she always shares with me, just saw my first bumblebee, just saw my first red-winged blackbird on my bird feeder. And it's something that we can share our observations and what basically this looks like in this particular year. And when you do that, like I said, you're participating in science. You're participating in something that's very ancient. I appreciate you looking at that. Now, I'm always trying to give a book to read. There is a book by Aldo Leopold called A Sand County Almanac, and it's really the gold standard. Leopold spent years at his farm in central Wisconsin observing and recording the seasonal rhythm of life. And he wrote it down with the precision of a scientist, but he's a poet. And his journal of January through December and the structure in there is amazing. And so if you haven't read it, it's certainly worth taking a look at. Like I said, Henry David Thoreau's journals in Walden Pond are amazing. It's another rich source of these kinds of events. And it's kind of fun, too, because you can sort of take a look at what it looked like 170 years ago or what it looked for Aldo Leopold and look at it and see how it compares to what it looks like right now. Appreciate you being out there. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any comments or questions, you can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. Tell a friend. Wouldn't you all just love to know a little bit more about nature right outside your front door?